Are you planning on buying a house in the near future? Well, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the major reasons why you should or maybe should not buy a house in 2024.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting. You'll spend it and be broke again.
So, for the longest time in this country, we have viewed owning a home as a great measure of success. But is that just something that we've been fed from an early age? Because as we can see, house affordability is at an all-time low.
So, what are some of the reasons that you might not want to buy a house in 2024? Just like Taylor kind of hit on, home affordability is all-time low. Because as we've seen many of the different graphs, the news telling us constantly, in the recent years, housing prices have gone absolutely crazy to the moon, and wages have slowly ticked up but have not kept up with that price.
At all.
And that goes across not just housing, but many other things, because you got to put your money to groceries and your gas, your insurance that have all gotten expensive.
Yeah.
So now what you have left over, you're trying to put towards a mortgage, and it makes it even less affordable. So just overall unaffordability is one of the main reasons. Maybe you don't buy a house. You don't want to get yourself in a hole that just keeps getting deeper.
Yeah. Because, I mean, prices are still very high, and you may be asking, yeah, but why? Well, some of the more simple answers is there's just a very low supply. I mean, people don't want to sell their house right now because they're going to have to re-enter the housing market themselves. Why would they sell a house that they got a great mortgage rate at like 10 years ago to re-enter and have to deal with like 7-8% nowadays? I mean, it's just not as feasible. And they're like, well, maybe they could sell it for way higher than they bought it, but they still have to buy now another one or at least
At the
find a new
same
place to
price.
live.
Yeah, exactly.
So the motivation to sell it really isn't there for a lot of people.
They've been talking about these hidden or invisible handcuffs with people that are locked into these 2-3% mortgages that don't want to get out, because then they have to go to the 8% at a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 house. That makes it astronomically more expensive. That it's not worth it. So it's these hidden handcuffs. They're keeping them in their house, even if they do want to move.
On top of that, there's just not that much new starter homes being built. A lot of homes are being built for rent or things like that. A lot of corporations are paying to have these things built and everything. So there's just not much of a new supply either.
And a lot of people, a huge generation about our age, are starting to get into prime home buying age. So not only is supply a record low, but demand is gone absolutely bonkers.
Oh.
And so people are all trying to buy a house at the same time when supply has been nothing but abysmal.
Yeah.
And so it causes prices to go higher and higher and higher. And so a lot of people are speculating that interest rates might come down, bringing more demand in the market, raising prices.
Yeah. So even if there is a slight dip that you're waiting for, you'd have to be almost at the very beginning of it to see any actual benefit. Because as all the demand that's kind of been waiting on the sideline re-enters with that slight dip, the prices just shoot back up.
Right. So another reason that you might not want to buy a house this year is, with supply being low, your options are lower, or there are less options out there. So we've personally talked to a number of people that have buyer remorse because with supply, they just chose something that was acceptable. You don't necessarily have to move into your forever home, but at the same time, you don't want to pick the best of the worst kind of thing. You want to find a nice livable house in an area you want to live in, so it's worth waiting. Maybe that's your situation. Is there's just in your area you want to live, there's just no supply, and for that reason, you don't want to pick the best of the worst. So in that case, you just wait.
Yeah,
that's a great reason.
Yeah, because a lot of people overpaid for a house. I mean, a couple years ago, people were buying houses sight unseen and everything.
No inspection.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine the things that people were having to throw out in their offer just to get accepted. And I know a lot of people that they got hit with a lot of unforeseen expenses and everything. And we also have a video about all these kind of hidden fees with home ownership beyond your mortgage, because there are a lot, guys. So reference that. We're not going to get too in the weeds with that. But I mean, people get hit with all these fees and they're overpaying initially. So it's just a lot of things where they get house poors, a term that you may have heard before, where they can't do anything else because all their money is going to this house. And one last little thing to consider that a lot of people don't talk about is simply the opportunity cost. I mean, a down payment and closing costs cost tens of thousands of dollars oftentimes. So the fact that you could have used that money for something else, I mean, that's something to consider. Maybe you did overpay for a house and everything, and you ended up losing value and everything right there. That turns out to not be a great investment when you could have taken that 20, 30, whatever it may be, $1,000 and invested into stocks, or maybe, just quality life and invest in yourself. Maybe take an extra vacation with some of that money. Don't go crazy. But yeah, that opportunity cost is also something you just have to remind yourself of.
So now going into some of the reasons you should buy a house. So oftentimes you talk to people, they almost always say, I know what was going on, I know the craziness that happened, but I wish I bought sooner.
Oh yeah.
Just because once you see 30 years down the road, 50 years down the road, and you're in that situation, you're like, man, this house is so much more valuable.
Yeah.
The area's developed so much. The school system's really blown up, done really well. Whatever the reason in your situation, so many people have said, I wish I bought sooner.
Mhm.
I know the market was about to crash, or I know the market did crash and I didn't buy, I was too nervous. I wish I would have bought then. I wish I would have bought here. So many people say that. And historically speaking, do we expect real estate to go up in the future or down? It's up. So even if we do have small blips, small drops, we expect it to keep increasing. So if you wait and wait and wait, it might just be more expensive. Even if interest rates get lower, you might just see home prices go up that much faster.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced this personally when I first started looking for a house.
Oh, yeah.
It was unbelievable to see some of these prices, and the interest rates were so high, like 6%. Goodness gracious. And I waited a couple months. Guess what happened? Home prices only went up, interest rates only went up. So I ended up buying a house later on down the line, like 6 months later, and I could have saved a ton of money had I just bought a few months prior. But in that moment, at that point in time, everyone was like, oh, it's so expensive. It's got to come down. It's got to come down. And I'm like, yeah, I'm waiting for that drop. And that drop still hasn't happened.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and it may not, no one can accurately predict the housing market, obviously. Some people, they get lucky and get fairly close, but nobody actually knows what's going to happen. And with all that said, I mean, we're not saying that there's not any markets that don't drop in value, because you do see that from time to time where a town just kind of a great valuable business is lost and a bunch of people move out and everything and home prices drop. We're not saying it's a guarantee that home prices increase over time in your area, but the general trend over history has been that.
And another big reason that you might want to buy a house is a personal reason. Maybe prices are crazy, interest rates are crazy, but you want to be close. You just had a kid, you want to be closer to family. That's your specific situation.
Yeah.
And it's a great reason. You are in a situation where you need to be closer to family, help them out with childcare, all that. It's a fantastic reason. So you might still want to buy a house and just pay attention to the trends. See if you can find a reasonable house in a reasonable area. Maybe go visit your family and see it bounce around to the different neighborhoods, different sub-cities that work, and find one that you thought this one was going to be great, but you had no idea this one existed, to really help try and save a little bit of money. Maybe find a better neighborhood. You never know.
Yeah. Because, I mean, another reason to consider buying sometimes is simply rental prices have also shot up. They're crazy expensive. Sometimes you hear about people's rent in some of these bigger cities, and it's mind-blowing what people are paying. Because, as home prices increase, that's just kind of been the trend throughout history as well, as rental prices follow right behind it. So in some areas, rent is just expensive as a mortgage. Now, like we've said before and in other videos, there are more expenses with home ownership than renting.
Definitely.
That's just how it is. But, if it's kind of right there and you have done the math for yourself and figured out what kind of works for you, maybe it works mathematically to also own still. And maybe you noticed in this video that we talked a good bit more about the reasons maybe you shouldn't buy than you should. Now, that's not to discourage you or anything, but it is something that you just have to remind yourself of, that's kind of the market that we're in. It's not really a buyer's market still, especially a couple years ago where people were buying things sight unseen. Maybe it's improved slightly, but by no means are there favorable terms for buyers right now. Kind of everyone's upset with everything. Buyers are upset, sellers are upset. It's kind of a weird spot to be in right now. But that is something to consider. Now, ultimately, it is up to you. We're not saying buy a house, not buy a house. Ultimately, your decision and your family's decision, if you have a family that you have to consider, it's something that you have to kind of decide for yourself. There's tons of variables that go into this.
Yeah, just like Taylor said, that's the general idea. Is there's generally, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking more reasons not to buy in this moment, this market, than there are to buy. But your specific situation, your personal situation, could be completely different. Just like we had an example in reasons to buy. Or investors. Some investors are still buying. There's no hesitation. So it depends on your situation, and be aware that, as always, this is just for fun, educational purposes. This is not financial advice. We're not saying go buy a house or never buy a house. Nothing like that. This is just information, trends we saw, we thought we'd talk about. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any comments on this video, any reasons we forgot, please leave them in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting. You'll spend it and be broke again.